Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about Amirah Dyme, how attractive is Amirah Dyme, and if you want to get your face rated, I'm going to have my email down in the description, so make sure to email me if you want to get your face rated. So Amirah Dyme, obviously, she's an Instagram model, so her face rating should be high. Her overall facial rating is a 7. How rare is that? That's 1 in 92 faces, alright? Her side facial score is 57% harmony. That's for the harmony score. Her front facial score is a 75% for harmony. Her total facial harmony score is a 68%. Her facial dimorphism, how feminine the face looks, is a 6. Body fat factors is a 7. Miscellaneous features is a 9.5. Tier list: Tier 1, ideal. Tier 2, near ideal. Tier 3, normal. Tier 4, slight flaw. Tier 5, flaw. Tier 6, huge flaw. Tier 7, breaks harmony. So remember the tier list, alright? So these are her overall flaws that I noticed. These are her main flaws, the biggest flaws that she has that I can recount. So her overall facial assessment breakdown: Amirah's total facial height to weight ratio was too high due to her cheekbones not being protrusive enough. And this can be shown with the compactness of her midface being on the longer side. The jaw angle from the side is way too box-like, almost close to a square, which is not ideal in any facial structure because the gonial angle is more on the narrower side. So what this too means is that her cheekbones is not protrusive enough, so the width of her head is not wide enough compared to everything else, because the width of her head is being related to a whole bunch of other measurements. And when it's not too wide, because women tend to have wider cheekbones, so bizygomatic width to bizygomatic width. And for the side view profile, her jaw morphology is not that good in respect to her gonial angle. Her gonial angle is too box-like. It's not wide enough. So really it comes down to her ramus. Her ramus isn't bookended back a little bit more. If it was slightly bookended back a little bit more, think of the ramus and the mandible as being two vectors meeting each other. But the ramus has to be tilted a little bit backwards, and that's exactly what's going on. So her jaw is, or her gonial angle is not the best. The rarity scores of celebrities. So any of your celebrities that you want to know, these are the rarity scores. Alright, so her eye separation ratio, how far apart is her eyes relative to her cheekbones, is at 47.7%, which is at the upper end of it, but it's still within the ideal range. Facial thirds is ideal. Each third is equal, and this is very favorable. Her canthal tilt is at 9.2 degrees, which is perfect. So that's a very, very upturned eyes. Her facial width to height ratio, how compact is her face? It's not all the way compact. If it was closer to a 1.9, then it will be more compact and it will be more within the ideal range. So it's very close, but not all the way ideal. Her jaw frontal angle is at 90 degrees, so she does have a pretty angular jaw for the most part. Her cheekbone height steadiness is extremely high at 90%. This is very rare, and it's at a tier 1, so that is within the ideal range. Her bigonial width, how wide is her lower third, is not as wide as her cheekbones. It is kind of narrower, and when you have a bigonial width that is this narrow, what happens is it kind of her bigonial width is a little bit too narrow, so what will happen is it'll give you kind of like a light bulb effect a bit, and the line is a little bit under her lip line, because that's exactly where her gonial angle is relative to where the mastery muscle is. Should be above it. But yeah, you do not want a jaw that's a little bit too narrow, on the narrower side. It might not look narrow, but trust me, it's very narrow. It just, the mastery muscles kind of get in the way. Her facial height to width ratio. So how tall is her head? And she does have a more taller head than the width of it. And this is due to the fact that her cheekbones is not as protrusive as it should be. Okay. And go to the next one. Her chin to philtrum ratio is at a normal range. It's kind of close to 2, but it's not at 2 yet. It's at 1.85. So it's 0.15 difference between being within the ideal, which is between 2 to 2.5. And that means that her philtrum is not her philtrum needs to be a little bit short, or her chin needs to be a little bit taller. And I think it might have to be the chin. Her neck width is at a normal range and is at 69%. Now, if her neck was just a bit wider relative to the width of her face, that will be more proportional, and it needs to be at least 75%, which is not too far off from 75%. Her mouth to nose width ratio, she does have the ideal mouth to nose width ratio. I think they call it the golden ratio, and she has a mouth to nose width ratio of 1.47, which is in the ideal range. So her nose is not too wide, it's very proportional to her eyes, and her lips is very proportional to her eyes as well. The mid-face ratio is 1:1, so it's supposed to be like a box, like kind of like a square, like. So the line between the pupils compared to the line between the eye line and the line from the upper lip. So the line from the pupils and the line from the eye line to the upper lip is supposed to be 1:1. So they're supposed to be the exact same, which it is. So that's why I call it a box. Eyebrow high settiness. How high is the eyebrows relative to the eye shape, or the height of the eyes, I should say, and is at 0.8% or 0.8. 80%, but I consider it 0.8. And that is a tier 1, which is within the ideal range. So she does have mid-set eyes, or mid-set eyebrows, I guess you could say, and it's not too high and it's not too low, which is in the ideal range for women. Her eye spacing is 1 with eyes apart, which is perfect. So she gets full points for that. Her eye aspect ratio is a little bit on the narrower side. But it was very close, because the ideal is at 3.2. That's the higher end of it, and she got 3.3. So I kind of had to deduct a little bit for it, but it's still near the ideal range. It's very almond shape. Lower lip to upper lip ratio is very good at 1.42. It's supposed to be at 1.4 to 2. And it's within the ideal range. Her deviation from her mid-face to her jaw is at 1 degree, so it should not deviate that far. That's how to tell how harmonious her face is relative to the jaw. Her eyebrow tilt, how tilted is her eyes? Her eyes is a bit tilted at 22 degrees, so that is too tilted. You do not want your eyes to be too tilted or look uncandid, or you might even look kind of like a supervillain, and you do not want to do that. But it's still within near the ideal, so she didn't get deducted that many points for it. Her bitemporal width, how wide is her forehead? And it is pretty wide at 86%, which is still within the ideal range, so that is perfect. Her lower third proportions is perfect at 35% compared to her overall lower third. And her chin to her bottom lip versus her philtrum to her upper lip is at 35%, which is perfect. It should not deviate more than 3% from 33. Her ipsilateral alar angle, which is her mid-face angle from the base of the nose all the way to the outside of her eye crease, and it is a tier 1 at 91%. Which means that this is in the ideal range, so her eyes are not too wide set. Now, this is one of her main flaws right here, is her gonial angle. If her ramus, so that line going all the way straight to her ear, if that line was a little bit backwards, then it might be towards the ideal range, which is at least the lower end is at least 114 degrees, and she has 110 degrees. So the angle is a bit too narrow, and it needs to be a little bit more wider to give her more jaw body and more of a better angle, I guess you could say. So really, is the ramus not being backed a little bit more? But that's still within the normal range. It's not like uncanny or anything like that. Her nasal frontal angle is perfect at 132 degrees. Women tend to have less of a brow ridge, so that's why the angle is more obtuse. The mandibular plane angle is perfect at 19 degrees. Her ramus to mandible, so she does have a lengthy ramus at 0.64, so 64% of her ramus is to her mandible. So her ramus is 64% of the mandible length, which is ideal. Her facial convexity from the glabella is also ideal. It's at the lower end, but it's still ideal at 169 degrees. Her submental curvical angle is also ideal, or actually not, is within the normal range, I mean to say. And she is kind of looking up in the photo, so I had to subtract a little bit from the actual angle itself, but it's still within the normal range. And this can be due to the fact, like I said, maybe even her posture. I think the jaw angle has to do a little more with it, in my honest opinion. But her posture might be a little bit off, so that's probably why the angle is still within the normal range, but it's not within the ideal range. Her nasal facial angle, all right, so it's the inner angle between the nasal bridge and the chin is at 37 degrees, so it's literally 1 degree off from being within the ideal, which is at 36 degrees. Her nasolabial angle is at 84, and the reason why it's her nose isn't really downturned. What the problem is that her upper lip is too upturned. Her upper lip is too protrusive, and you will see later when I do the lip measurements that her upper lip is way too protrusive. Her orbital vector is positive, as you can see. There's bone underneath the eyes. Total facial convexity is actually very perfect at 145 degrees. It's still within the upper range, but it's still a tier 1, and that might be also due to her having somewhat of a protrusive nose, believe it or not. Mental labial angle, all right, is that crease between the chin and the bottom lip, and is at 93 degrees, and that is within the normal range but not within the ideal range. I think the angle was a little bit too narrow. Her facial convexity from the nasion is 163 degrees. That's the angle is not within the ideal range. If the angle was a little bit more obtuse to, let's say, 168 degrees, which is still on the lower end, that would be perfect. Her nasal projection, all right? And another thing too that I noticed is I think her maxilla is a little bit too forwardly grown compared to her chin as well. So if her maxilla wasn't as forwardly grown, some of these measurements will be perfect. Her nasal projection, how projected is her nose, is at 60%. So she does have a very projected nose relative to the nasal bridge. And the width compared to the height, so the width to height projection. So this measurement determines how long is the nose relative to the outline. So how lengthy is the nose, and it's not lengthy at all, but it's still within the normal range. It's not like completely short and stubby, and at 98%, which is not. All right, so the rictus E-line. Now these measurements are going to pretty much expose her lip protrusion. So the E-line goes from the nasal tip down to the chin, and the upper lip and the lower lip is actually supposed to be behind the line, where the upper lip is more behind the line at 4 millimeters and the bottom lip is behind the line by 2 millimeters. And as you can see, her upper lip and bottom lip is touching, and that is not ideal at all. Her H line, right? The line goes from the upper lip down to the chin, and her bottom lip is actually supposed to be touching the line, but should not go past the line. And from this, you can see that her upper lip is past the line. Now, the reason why I give her a tier 3, which is unideal, is for the simple fact that her mouth is slightly open a little bit. And I know if her mouth was closed or shut, the bottom lip will be past the line even more. So I have to give that a tier 3. The S line, a tier 3 again, goes from the clamella, all right, all the way down to the chin, and the upper lip and bottom lip is actually supposed to barely touch the line. And from what you can see, the upper and bottom lip is past the line again, so that is a flaw. Her bursal line, all right, going from the subnasal down to the chin, the upper lip is supposed to be ahead of the bottom lip 3 to 2, all right, or at least 3.5 millimeters to 2, and which you could see the upper lip is past the bottom lip relative to that line. I know it's a little bit more than usual, but I still gave it to her, so I put that as a tier 1. Her nasal mental angle is 126 degrees, so it's the relationship between the nose projection and the chin projection, all right? And this doesn't really clue in to the facial convexity as well, so that's why this measurement is very good and is within the ideal range. The gonial to mouth relationship. So you want your gonian to be past the mouth line, all right? And her gonian is way past the mouth line, so that means that she has a very developed jaw morphology, I guess you could say. It just, the problem is the angle isn't all there, but the gonian is definitely past the mouth line, and which also means jaw body as well. Recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle, and she does not have any recession. She does have a forwardly protrusive chin and is past the nasion and also past the glabella. As you guys can see right there, is past the forehead, and she doesn't really have a protrusive forehead relative to her nasal bridge. Her brow ridge inclination, how forward sloped back is her forehead, and is within 16 degrees, so that's still within kind of like more of the masculine range, but still that's still a good inclined forehead, so that is within the ideal range as well. Her nasal tip, so this is the last angle right here at 123 degrees. This is not a bad nasal tip. This is just a normal nasal tip. There's no real flaw to it at all. She does have a slightly bulbous nose towards the end, just with enough protrusion. So that's why it the nasal tip kind of looks a little bit angular within respect, but this is not a bad nasal tip at all. And Amirah Dyme's overall score is a 7, which is 1 in 92 faces. Like I said again, if you want me to rate your face, make sure to go to my email and let me know that you want to get your face rated, so I can tell you exactly what your score is. And tell me also whether you're a male or female too, so I can have an idea of what to do and what to send you for more information on how to take the right photos. And I will prefer different photos from different angles, as well as not to have one angle or maybe like 1 or 2 photos, because I do want to see photos in different angles, different lightings, different everything. So because what I do is I compare each photo with each different angle to see if they align properly. So jaw angles, I want the jaw angles to be the same for different photos, so I know I got the right photo.